If I took his leadership class at Ohio State last decade, which he used to teach a class of leadership, I would be contacting the school and asking for a tuition reimbursement.
Megan McPeak, what is hotter, your holiday sweater or your spiciest sports take from this weekend?
Probably my sweater, just because it's spicy. Because I feel like, so it's not an ugly sweater. I just feel like, given the times, everybody needs a little peace in their life. Jeez. And I feel like that's actually spicy given how people are right now.
Right, that is a spicy take, because like the opposite is what's hot in these streets right now. So thank you for that. Dave Zirin, what's hotter, your holiday sweater or your spiciest sports take from the weekend?
Well, you tell me, Morgan, because I not only have my Baltimore Ravens holiday sweater, but it does.
Oh, jeez.
So
like that is actually probably literally hot.
If it wasn't for the seizure potential, I would leave these on the entire episode. So I'll turn them off out of respect for anyone who has issues with flashing lights. And my hottest take, it's actually related to the sweater. It's that John Harbaugh, the coach of the Baltimore Ravens, may actually be trying to kill me. Master assassin that he is. He is going for it in the cleverest, most possible way. Losing 3 games by 4 combined points. That's never happened in NFL history. And it's all through a series of late game decisions by John Harbaugh, who clearly wants to send me to a watery end.
You know what's amazing? 87-year-old Tom Brady was probably a 6th round draft pick, probably the greatest quarterback of all time. Lamar goes down, Huntley steps in, and he was not a 1st round draft pick. But what you won't see is like some movement of football nerds saying, you know what? Quarterbacks are overvalued. Why draft a quarterback in the 1st round? Look at Brady. Look at Huntley. We can just say all these quarterbacks are interchangeable the same way they do about running backs. You won't see that happening somehow, but this is amazing. All right. So a lot of you guys are probably wondering why I'm holding a pillow in front of my chest, because this is not a holiday sweater. This is a pillow of a girl reading a book. And so first, because the question is your spiciest take hotter than your holiday sweater? Here's my spicy sports take from the weekend. Here's my spicy sports take, and we'll get to this. Urban Meyer is going to coach again. I am 100% convinced. This is a spicy take. People are telling me this guy's never going to coach again. There's going to be a college that hires this guy. They don't care that he flamed out in the most spectacular way possible of the NFL. He's still a great college coach, still a successful college coach. He can go to college and complain about the kids getting paid and blah, blah, blah. But somebody is going to find some money in a program for Urban Meyer. It's just a question of whether or not he wants it. But that take is not as hot as this holiday sweater that I had made. Dave Zirin.
Oh,
Corey.
one of the great magazine covers in the history of American journalism.
Yes. So for you young people, that's Sonny Liston on the cover of Esquire. And so for you people that are really young, like Sonny Liston is the guy that Ali beat for the title back in 1964. And the thing about Sonny Liston, like at this time, he was a heavyweight champion. And at this time, like they hadn't seen anybody like Sonny Liston. Like when you think about stereotypes of boxers, like growing up as thugs and all of this, like Sonny Liston was that guy. Like Sonny Liston had been in prison, like he beat up a cop and dumped him in a garbage can in St. Louis. One of his jobs was like as a strike breaker, like the mob would go hire him to beat up on protesting black workers. Like Sonny Liston was like a bad dude in a lot of ways. And Esquire tapped into this and they were like, hey, Merry Christmas, America. Here's Sonny Liston dressed up as Santa Claus on the cover of Esquire magazine. So there we go. So this is like a special, it was supposed to be like a special year-end edition, but stuff keeps happening. Like the year-end wrap-ups only work when like the news slows down, and the news has not slowed down. But we do have some special guests. So we're going to talk more urban renewal in Jacksonville, Florida, because Dave has been itching like for 2 weeks, just watching these stories pile up, and like we are on hiatus, and Dave is like bubbling, bursting. He's about to burst like a. He starts to whistle like a teapot, a kettle when it boils. Dave's been waiting for this, so we're gonna talk urban renewal in Jacksonville. We're gonna talk COVID and the sports world, because these stories do not stop coming. And we are going to talk soccer with our first guest, Shireen Ahmed. Like, if we're talking soccer, we got to have Shireen, or if Shireen is here, you know we are talking soccer. So we are talking soccer. About a week ago, more than that, because there's a bit of a lag time. What's up, Shireen? About a week ago, the Women's Professional Soccer League of Canada, they came in hot on Twitter. They tweeted that we are answering the call for women's professional soccer, to which Canadian national team star Steph Labbe said, well, who is we? Because it turns out the Women's Professional Soccer League was only going to have what they were proposing was a 2-month season with semi-pro players, which is something, but it's not quite what people in the soccer community have been saying we need in this country. Shireen Ahmed, what is even happening here? And like, what is this void that the WPSL Canada calls itself filling?
First of all, appreciate everyone's sweaters. Love that. I just wanted to say that this is not a brown Muslim man. This is a Santa, actually, but it can be both technically.
Why not?
So that's my addition. It kind of looks like my dad, to be honest. So soccer. Now I'm gonna break it down for you really simply. When you get men involved in trying to organize and create stuff, what happens is women end up trying to solve the problems created by men. So this particular WPSL, first of all, I would like to point out that I went to their Twitter account this morning prepping for this show. Their account is temporarily restricted.
Yes, which I noticed yesterday.
That's not a good sign for anybody involved in this, because do you want to look shady when you're trying to bring yourself out into the world and say you're supporting a particular margin within sports that already doesn't have the platform and people doubt? I don't think so. That's not exactly what you want to happen. So there's that. Now I was looking through, and just because I am who I am, I was digging through that, chair of operations, the director of operations, Santiago Almada, and like his connection. That's a flag for me when I can't find any director previous work in development of women's sport in Canada. I just can't. Secondly, when the professional players you're seeking to bring are doubting you, just going to bring back Diana Matheson, former national women's team player, has been on the scene talking about this for a long time. When those players remain largely silent, when you have a movement to try to advance women's sports, but the very players that you're interested in rallying around you are not saying anything and don't know who you are and don't know what this is. So I think there's two things happening here. And then all the women's soccer fans, because you all know the most intense of the soccer fans are the women's one, and they're very committed. You can look at the NWSL fan base. They are borderline, something else, but they're intense. And also with social media, everybody's an investigative journalist. So they're going to bring and drag this down, which is what's happening. And I think you have to look really practically, because basically what Labbe ended up saying was, we're not playing for scraps. This is not what's happening. And that's what it felt like. They literally, I don't know what the Canadian women's national team has to do. What do they have to do? Do they have to talk? They have to organize this as a team in terms of labor. They did that. Erin McLeod led that charge. Do they have to be the forerunners in this country for talking about LGBTIQ rights? They've done that. Do they have to show solidarity with Black Lives Matter? They've done that. Do they have to work with supporting Frontline during COVID? They've done that. They've checked off every conceivable box for being one of the most impressive teams and consistent with being, very tuned into what's happening in their world and in the world. And they're saying, in addition to that, we're going to be the best in the world. They've done it. We know the product is good. We know they're excellent. They're not playing for 2.5 months of a season, semi-pro league with no sponsors committed, each individual league owner. I'm sorry, Santiago, I don't know who you are, but I'm not interested in this, because this strikes me as something some uncle in a parking lot is trying to set up. Like, that's what this sounds like to me. So no.
Yeah, what I didn't get is, if you are going to launch something like this in a country where the women's national team has just won an Olympic gold medal and their profile is higher than it's ever been, the first thing you do is get those folks on side. You don't just drop this and hope that they come to you. You get them on side now. And if the league that you're trying to build clearly isn't something that works for people at those players level, because these are people that play overseas, play in the NWSL, they make by women's soccer standards, like good money. Why are they going to give that up to play semi-pro ball for 2.5 months a year? Like they're not. So you got to get them on side in some other way. Maybe they can endorse your league and say, this isn't something for me. I'm Christine Sinclair. This isn't something for me, but you could cultivate the next Christine Sinclair here, but don't like pretend that this is the thing that folks are asking for. Dave or Megan, like does the success of the women's national soccer team here in Canada and the Olympic gold medal, does that allow like decision makers to kind of obscure structural problems that might bite the sport in the butt, 5 or 10 years down the road? Dave, I'll throw it to you.
Throw it to me. I think absolutely. I mean, one of the things we know about sports is that success can obscure the need for structural change. So you say, look, this happened, like we hired this manager of color, or look, we hired this women executive, and that allows entire organizations, entire leagues to be able to take a step back and say, look, we don't actually have a problem in this regard when the problems continue to fester. So absolutely, we have to be wary of that, because the success and whatnot, that's the icing. And everybody loves the icing. But if we're not having a constant focus on the cake, it allows for these problems to get pushed along for years, if not decades.
Yeah, and it's an output. It's a result that allows you to pretend the process is sound when really, like, as we just mentioned, a lot of these players are playing in Europe, and like that's where they're sharpening their skills. That's where they're playing against the best players. And so if you are going to try to establish a league in Canada that you are calling yourself the viable alternative to people going over to Europe, then that's what it has to be, because you're not going to leave your gig at Chelsea or whatever, PSG, to come play, no disrespect to Toronto or whatever, but to come play back at home for 2 months a year for, a fraction of the salary. But Megan McPeak, because these are similar to discussions that men's soccer has, but also that basketball has, right? And there are a few domestic leagues here in Canada, but like fully domestic and fully professional at that level, how feasible is that even in Canada?
I think the biggest thing is, to Shireen and Dave's point, is they need to take many steps back and actually have people in place that have done this before, not necessarily soccer, but have just helped develop a league in some capacity that has been successful. Because that's the key thing, is you can't just develop these leagues and then they fizzle out after a year or two. You can't keep doing that. You're just going to have the female version of arena football. Like, you can't continue to build a league, think that players are going to want to come home and play at home just because they can play at home. No, they have bills to pay. They have families to support. They're still working. This is their job. So if you're going to, quote unquote, be the feasible alternative to your point, Morgan, of going over to Europe and making money, then you need to pay me what I would be making over there. And if you can't match that, or come within, $1 or $2 grand close to that, then what are you doing? Like, in all honesty, because the other thing too, if they play in the NWSL, then they go overseas to play. Where's this 2.5 months coming from? Like, where are you building this? Are we adding 2.5 months to the calendar year that we didn't know about just for this women's soccer professional league in Canada? Like, what are you really doing? You clearly have no background. Again, to Shireen's point, someone who is trying to build this league clearly has no resume of doing this before. So that is a huge red flag. They needed to have everything prepared so that when questions were then thrown at them on Twitter, and again, I get it, the social media people are not the answers, okay? It's like when teams post something, don't expect the team to tell you why they made a trade. It's not the social media people's, that's not part of their job description, okay? They're just doing their job. But when you get all these questions fired at them, at least maybe they are, prepared and have talking points that they can hit back with and be like, oh, okay, we were prepared for this. We can answer that. They couldn't do anything, nothing, because you were clearly not prepared. If I was a professional soccer player, I would be laughing at this. Not even just Canadian professional soccer player, just professional soccer player, period. I would be laughing at this. They are the laughing stock of the sports world. And we still have Urban Meyer in football.
Just to jump off of what Megan's saying too.
Yes.
is that this is very clearly a situation where they didn't actually consult the players and the people who are already doing this. And that's one of the things that bothered me the most about this. Like, to what Megan said, do you even know what they're asking for? Like, are you here because you think it's so? On the one hand, I'm glad that people think that women's football is profitable and it's a lucrative thing, because that's something else we've been fighting for so long. But on the other hand, to sort of, I guess, wash away what they have been asking for. This is literally not it. Like, this ain't it. That's not what they're asking for. And that bothered me a lot, because it's not as if this team is not vocal. They literally are one of the most vocal teams in terms of a unified front as well. And not only the national team, but so many of the Canadian players who do play abroad is just, it's really staggering to me how little that this reflected knowledge of any of that.
Absolutely. And listen, Shireen, before we let you go, give us two things. What's your spiciest sports take from the weekend?
It's that I feel like we're at a point of this plague that people are taking cues from their teams and their leagues. Because in Canada, people shut down the NHL. And listen, if I'm going to be taking, I come from a province where, I just think things have been terribly mismanaged. The cases are up $4,000 a day, like $4,000. The cases up to 4,000 a day. It's a mess. But when it seems as if the NHL is more responsible in their practice, that's personally something I'm going to be worried about. If I'm looking to Gary Bettman to give me proper operating procedure, if this is what it's come to, that I'm looking at him going, that's a responsible decision. I need to reevaluate my entire life, all of it. So that's what I'm saying. Look at what they're doing. Like, the Raptors canceled the game, postponed a game rather, you know what I'm saying? So I don't think it's too hard to say. It may not be the spiciest, maybe more turmeric-y than anything else. But I'm saying maybe your sports teams aren't that bad in how they're maneuvering right now.
Listen, Shireen Ahmed is one of the hardest working people in this business and one of the best pure souls in this business. If you guys aren't following her on Twitter already, make sure you make it happen. Shireen Ahmed, we'll see you soon. And after, I guess, we all get boosted and can go outside again. Well, sorry, after we all get boosted, and if we're all outside, we'll see you in real life soon.
Yes, we're not running though, Morgan, but yes, we will see together in real life.
Right. Perfect. So listen, audience, we promised you guests, and there's more guests. Because we're talking COVID. Like, this is taking over the sports world. The NHL's on a holiday hiatus. The NFL is postponing games. The Raptors and the Magic, who were supposed to play Monday night, we record on Monday mornings, they had that game postponed because there were a bunch of COVID cases amongst the Magic and the crew of Magic players and staff that were set to travel to Toronto. Baker Mayfield of the Cleveland Browns, who, as we speak right now, is in COVID protocols, but saying he's asymptomatic. So between the time we record, between right now and the time we finish recording, that might have changed, because Baker Mayfield at this minute is lobbying to go take a test so he can test negative and play Monday afternoon. But here's what he tweeted December 16th regarding the NFL's COVID protocols. At NFL, make up your damn mind on protocols. Showing up and only making 3 teams test, all so you can keep the game as scheduled to make money. And again, that's Baker Mayfield tweeting that. It's not Colin Kaepernick or Justin Jackson. That's Baker Mayfield railing against the NFL's greed and their lack of regard for player health. So now, if we're talking Baker Mayfield plays for the Cleveland Browns. And if we're mentioning the Cleveland Browns, and you should know who our next guest is, it's Corey Erdman, who is the biggest Browns fan I've ever seen outside of Northern Ohio. Corey Erdman, what do you make, not just of what your favorite quarterback is saying, but of this idea that these sports leagues have decided to institute all these half measures to keep as many games as possible going, even though COVID is running through these rosters?
Well, first of all, considering the topic, and also I didn't know this about Dave, being a Ravens fan, I wore the wrong sweater today. Instead, I wore my Rudolph pun holiday shirt to support Notre Dame, because the Fiesta Bowl is coming up as well. I found this to be really interesting, because one thing that you have to say about Baker Mayfield is he has actually been very consistent on the topic of COVID-19. You might remember there was a preseason press conference where a reporter asked Baker Do you think it's a competitive advantage that your entire team is vaccinated? And he said, competitive advantage? Like, I'm just happy we're all safe and healthy. So Baker has always been consistent on this. What I found interesting, and I don't think has been addressed after what he was alleging, was the idea that only a handful of teams were tested and others were not.
Yes.
So and another thing to remember is that Baker Mayfield's center, ostensibly his close friend, J.C. Tretter, is the head of the NFLPA right now. So I was wondering, hey, is this Baker Mayfield being kind of a messenger for his pal, J.C. Tretter, who's seeing maybe some issues, a little bit of inconsistencies or a lack of overall testing, and Baker was the messenger for that. But unfortunately, to your point, Morgan, and this will come out way after, Baker will not be playing. This will be the debut of Nick Mullins playing tonight on Monday Night Football.
And this will be the day our man Nick Chubb breaks the 50 carry barrier. Nick Chubb Nick Chubb is going to get 50 carries against like not even an 8-man box. It'll be an 11-man box. The Raiders will just say, look, Nick Mullins, you're not throwing this football. Our whole defense is within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. Do what you must, Nick Chubb. We'll wait for fourth quarter Nick Chubb because you'll be exhausted this time. So do your worst. Dave Zirin, help me make sense of this, because the NFL is now saying we actually want to scale back testing on players if they're asymptomatic. Even though, like, what we're learning about Omicron is that Omicron infects unvaccinated people, but it doesn't particularly care if you're vaccinated. It'll get in there too. And even if the symptoms are what folks are calling mild, like mild, I guess, compared to death, you can still get it and you might still spread it to people. But the NFL, instead of saying, let's test more, they're saying if you're asymptomatic and vaccinated, we will test you less. Which I guess makes sense from the standpoint of like trying to keep these games going and trying to keep your stars on the field, because people tune in to see Baker Mayfield. No disrespect to Nick Mullins. They don't tune in to see Nick Mullins, but honestly, like back in the real world, like what the hell kind of sense does that make?
Well, first of all, it's nice to do any kind of show without Baker Mayfield being part of a commercial break and interrupting us. And second, it's nice to talk about Baker Mayfield for 5 seconds without mentioning his injuries, because no one else in the NFL is injured except for Baker Mayfield, as we're constantly reminded. Putting that aside, my God, I just want to say that the sports world is doing something very dangerous right now, and it's not just the NFL. In March 2020, the sports world sent a signal, not just to the United States, but to the world. Yes. When the NBA shut down after Rudy Gobert had a positive test and the NBA and the WNBA went into the bubble. That was a message to everybody that the world has been turned upside down and people have to get ready to live in a new reality. And as horrific as the body count has been for COVID, I believe that the decision by Adam Silver in March 2020 undoubtedly saved lives. Particularly given the lack of leadership coming from the White House in the United States. Fast forward to today, December 2021, a very different message from the sports world that's also going to be heard loud and clear throughout society. And that's that the show must go on. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's about the NFL. Yes, it's about profits. Yes, it's about making sure that the season ends. But at the same time, what they're saying to people, the message unmistakably, is that if you are asymptomatic, you need to just go out and live your life. You need to shop like it's Christmas. You can go to the games, and fill the stadiums. Yep. We want you there. We want business as usual, because asymptomatic does not necessarily mean you have COVID. And what a flagrantly irresponsible message that is. And the people that I feel terrible for, honestly, more than anybody, are team employees. Mm-hmm. Because these rules, let's be clear about this, they've been bargained not just by these aren't fiats by Roger Goodell or Adam Silver. These have been bargained with the players' associations in each case. And part of the bargaining is that they're putting it on the player to go up to medical officials if they feel. So rather than testing everybody and trying to figure out who has COVID, who has asymptomatic, they're putting it on the player to be able to go up to team doctors or chief medical officers or whatever they call them in the NFL and say, yeah, I'm not feeling well. And these are NFL players we're talking about. I mean, they could have a bone sticking out of their leg and they'll say it's a bruise. So we're going to count on them to go and say, yeah, I think I have a head cold.
Right.
To a team doctor when they want to get on that field, when there aren't guaranteed contracts, when they know that it's next man up and that their roster spot could be taken the next day. So, I mean, I find the developments of the last week extremely difficult to process, because on the one hand, the thinking person in me is like, my God, what an incredible dereliction of duty, how shockingly irresponsible this landscape is. And then there's another part of me, and I know we all feel this, that yearns to pretend that this isn't happening again and that we can still enjoy sports, because that does mean normalcy. Mm-hmm. But that involves looking in the mirror and lying to ourselves.
Yeah, David, because there's a part of it where you're depending on players to go volunteer when they don't feel good. But there's also the part of it where people are sick and it's up to them to decide whether or not to tell you that they are symptomatic. Right. And so I've got COVID, but I really want to get on the field. And again, the NFL, this is what we value, this is what we celebrate, like the person that's willing to go get a shot of Toradol before the game so they can ignore, a torn tendon or whatever. And so somebody's got COVID, has symptoms. Oh, I'm sniffing, but that's my allergies. That's not COVID. No, I'm fine. I'm asymptomatic. So you wait for these players to declare themselves asymptomatic, even though they might have a ringing headache or a bad cough. You can blame each symptom on something besides the COVID just to get people on the field.
How can we put the onus on players who are asymptomatic if they don't realize that they're asymptomatic with COVID? Because you don't have symptoms if you're asymptomatic. So if I'm an asymptomatic player, how am I supposed to know that I have COVID to go to the team and tell them, I don't have any symptoms, but I think I have COVID, especially if no one around me has also come to me and said, hey, Megan, I hate to be the one to do this to you, but I tested positive for COVID. I don't know if you have symptoms, but I need to let you know you need to get tested. Like, how do you know if I have my bubble, like if I'm doing what you're supposed to be doing, what people are expecting the players to do. And I apologize that I'm long-winded on this, but I thought of it after I was done my previous comment. And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, if I have my little bubble and my bubble is also respectful of me and they're vaccinated and they're testing to make sure they're safe, so that they're trying to help me stay safe so I can keep playing and making paychecks. If one of them tests positive and then comes and tells me, but I don't have symptoms, okay, yeah, it's on me. But if no one around me tests positive, how do I know if I'm asymptomatic if I don't have symptoms?
That's exactly it. And what they've decided is that the precaution, who needs a precaution? It's not like a new variant of this virus is ripping through the population faster than a rumor. Who needs precaution? Dave, what's up?
No, just to say that Megan makes a compelling argument for why there should be mandated testing. And frankly, not only in the NBA, but throughout the sports world. I mean, my wife's a public school teacher. They do mandated testing. They should be doing that in the NBA and the WNBA and every sports league, every industry right now, because there's no such thing anymore, I would argue, as contact tracing. We're all contact traced. We all got to be at this point. Right. I mean, in this Omicron, everybody I know either has COVID or has a friend who has COVID. The walls are coming in. And while I'm confident because, people around me are triple vaxxed that we'll be able to fight this and shake it off, and everybody should be vaxxed, I also feel very strongly that we have to be testing people because of asymptomatic folks. And we have to have the argument that really I can't deal with is when people talk about how healthy athletes are. So they should be taking the field anyway, as if there isn't a broader responsibility to team employees, to team announcers like the Megan McPeaks of this world, and to the family members, particularly children under 5 and the elderly who might be, and the immunocompromised. It's like we don't have any, certainly in the United States, I'm not going to speak for Canada, I never do, but any sense of collective solidarity, collective health, collective responsibility. If we had a culture of that in this country and a responsibility of it, the government would be sending tests to everybody's house so they could be in a state of constant monitoring, which is where we need to be at least for the next 6 weeks and we get through flu season.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that, Morgan, because I think what's happening is exactly the opposite of what Megan and Dave just pointed out, where I think we're in a state with such a transmissible variant that at least right now, until we can figure things out on the vaccine end that might be able to fight against this, the weapon that we have against this is constant testing. And instead, we're seeing kind of a push to go the other way, which is basically the game that Florida as a state has run, which is if we don't test and we don't know, the numbers can't go up. And that,
Exactly.
maybe enough people are asymptomatic and healthy enough that they don't feel it and they take the field. And whatever comes of that, if we don't know about it, we can't be liable and we can't feel bad about it. And that is an incredibly dangerous precedent that's being set right now.
Just lastly, just want to say that like the message is so important. I mean, never have I felt that sports has a power that it has now. Like I've been arguing for years that sports has a cultural power beyond the field and the court to actually affect conversations, affect how we speak about things, race, gender, sexuality. Sports is a marker. And this is one of those moments. Whereas I would argue that sports actually has the capacity to save lives or not save lives. And I'm very fearful of the course they're taking. And I'm someone who, you throw me a nickel and I'll criticize sports owners. It doesn't take a lot for me to do it. But I gotta say, we would be being dishonest if we did not say there was pressure coming from the players to keep playing because they want to be on the field, and pressure from fans who want to live in the reality where sports are still going on. I mean, so it's not just about, believe me, you don't have to do much for me to demonize Roger Goodell, but the idea that this is just coming from commissioners' offices, I think would be a fallacy in organizing why this is happening the way it is.
Corey Urban, before we let you go, you were at one of the last big attended events. Were you not in Montreal on the weekend?
So I called that fight remotely.
Okay.
And so, but just some background on some of the chaos that is even causing that COVID is causing in the boxing world. That fight that you're referencing, the light heavyweight title fight between Artur Beterbiev and Marcus Brown, they didn't know whether they would be able to even stage it the morning of the fight, because the day before the Montreal Canadiens game in the same venue was held without fans, and the Montreal Canadiens game the day after the fight was canceled entirely. So up until the morning of that fight, we didn't know if the fight was going to happen. I called it remotely, but both of my producers that I would normally work with at that studio both tested positive for COVID. So in order to call the fight, I had to go in and rapid test before I went on the air. And if I tested positive, I think there just would have been a Nat soundtrack over that fight on ESPN. So it's causing a lot of problems in my world as well.
It would have been Steve Molitor calling those fights solo, like Colonel Bob Sheridan, one-man broadcast team. All right, Corey, before we let you go, tell the people where they can find you in between episodes.
You can find me on the airwaves, as Morgan described, popping up in all sorts of places. You can often find me on ESPN Plus and Box Nation and Sky Sports. But written stories, you can find those from me every morning on boxingscene.com every Monday morning. So you can follow me on Twitter as well at Corey_Erdman.
Perfect. All right, Corey, we'll see you soon. I'll be back in your DM soon talking about whatever. Stick around for this next topic because Corey knows, like, the next topic, I have not been able to get enough of this thing. But guys, that was Corey Erdman, columnist at boxingscene.com, one of the best boxing commentators out there on either side of the border. So Dave Zirin, here's a quote from someone you know and respect. I think college has changed quite a bit too. Just society has changed. I think how hard I pushed, I believe there's greatness in everybody. It's the coach's job to find that greatness. However you do that, positive encouragement, pushing them to be greater, making them work harder, identifying flaws and trying to fix them. I think everything is so fragile right now. And that includes coaching staffs. When I got into coaching, coaches weren't making this kind of money and they didn't have agents. Everything is so fragile. Where it used to be team.
Wow. Was that from the comments section of a Joe Rogan YouTube video?
That was from Urban Meyer to the NFL Network. And so to hear Urban Meyer tell it, the main problem is that is not that he had no clue how to run an NFL team. It's that everyone and everything is so fragile. And now assistant coaches make money and now they have agents. And that's why his team went 2-11 under his watch, and why every single person who ever spoke about him in public, never had anything good to say about him. Dave Zirin, so my question to you is, to what extent is Urban Meyer full of crap when he blames a changing society for the fact that he fell on his face in his first and probably only tenure as an NFL coach?
Well, it's fragile. It's Urban Meyer's marriage. I mean, dude needs to keep his hands to himself and worry about that first, and then he can.
I'm surprised you went. I'm surprised that's the first place you took it. But go
that's
ahead,
the first place I took it. Was the
all the places you could have taken it. Wow,
on the whole place to take it. Second thing, let's go big picture. We're living in an incredible golden age for the aggrieved white man over the age of 50 years old. They feel like this is their time to shine, and Joe Rogan is their hero. You hear it in the words of Aaron Rodgers talking about the woke mob. Now Urban Meyer talking about fragility. The only real fragility on display is the white fragility of Urban Meyer, who can't deal with the fact that he just got fired after drafting the number one quarterback prospect of his generation. Do you know how incredibly rare that is? He could have gone 0-17, and they would have said, give Urban Meyer more time because we have Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is like a get out of getting fired free card. And yet Urban Meyer couldn't hack it. That makes him one of the worst coaching hires in the history of the National Football League. Hugh Jackson lasted 2 seasons. Rich Kotite lasted 2 seasons. This is some Lou Holtz New York Jets era type of coaching that we're seeing right now that we saw, thank goodness, from Urban Meyer. And I got to tell you, if I took his leadership class at Ohio State last decade, which he used to teach, a class of leadership, I would be contacting the school and asking for a tuition reimbursement. I mean, the person has no leadership qualities whatsoever. He managed to turn his entire coaching staff and his entire team against him in very short order. He turned Marvin Jones, who's the veteran leader of that club, against him. And Marvin Jones is one of the chillest people you'd ever want to meet in your life. I mean, inspiring Marvin Jones to say, I don't want you here anymore, I mean, is next level in terms of your ability to create waves of alienation among the people around you. So I said early on when he was hired, I remember on the show, I called him Urban Blight, and I said that I wished I could buy stock in this failing. Unfortunately, that stock was not available, but I would have sold my house and put all the money on this because Urban Meyer is a failure walking. But as you said, there will be a cushion waiting for him at the collegiate football level, because I liken Urban Meyer to Fredo from The Godfather. And him going to the NFL was sending him to Las Vegas. He failed miserably in Las Vegas. And so what the college football world is going to do is the equivalent of shooting Mo Green in the eye, bringing him back into the fold and giving him some $10 million a year job, because he's a made guy at the college level, but at the, not just the NFL level, but at the leadership level, at the societal level, at the aggrieved white man level, at the fragility level. I mean, everything you could possibly imagine. Urban Meyer put that now on his resume. And if Urban Meyer really wants to deal with the issue of fragility in society and people who don't take responsibility for themselves, he needs to start by looking dead square in the mirror.
Megan McPeak, how predictable was this?
I feel like Dave just laid everything out that we needed. Like, what else is that? I mean, in all honesty, I wish I could fail up like Urban Meyer. Like, really, because we know he's going to get a coaching job somewhere in college football. Today's point, like, it's going to happen. It's not a matter of when, but where, literally. I think had this happened a couple weeks ago, it's very possible that we would not have seen Notre Dame make the move that they made. I'm just going to say that.
True.
We'll put it out there.
That is true. At least not without having offered Urban the job first for him to turn down. Yes.
Exactly. And number two, I feel like as someone who does not know a lick about football, I, with the help of my NFL insiders, who are actually, pretty decent, Ryan Clark, Marcus Spears, Dorn Orlovsky, I would have gotten to those 3. I feel like I could have actually gotten 3 wins, maybe even 4 out of
100%.
Trevor Lawrence.
100%.
And I'm really sad that I was not given the opportunity.
You could be a multimillionaire right now. 100%.
The first call I would make would be Ryan Clark and say, bro, I need some help here.
First Canadian NFL head coach, you would be made. Like, you'd be a made woman.
I feel like I could have done better. I wouldn't have I definitely wouldn't have kicked my kicker.
Right?
I wouldn't have been caught at the local saloon dancing with another lady.
Local saloon with your name on it. And your pictures everywhere. I feel
like I would have done better.
Good. You also you would have been smart enough to delegate and let professionals be professionals, because
thank you. Also true.
Out of 53 players on the roster, and Urban Meyer, guess which one of those people actually knows what it's like to be in the NFL? It's the players, it's not the coach. And so like there's a temptation to see this as sort of a referendum on successful college coaches and why they don't succeed in the NFL, but that's not really true. What it is a referendum on is college coaches whose egos don't let them make the adjustment to the NFL. Like I mentioned this, I reference this every now and then. Like I'm a former Division I college football, Big Ten college football bench warmer. And, but like the guys you knew, they would go to the NFL and they would come back to campus. Now, when Chris Martin or Darnell Autry like came back to campus, like we would ask them what it's like in the NFL, right? And they would say, well, it's football. Football is football, but it's a lot faster and you have to pay a lot more attention to detail, but at a much higher speed because everybody is so good. But what we didn't do was tell the NFL guys how they should play because we're in college, which is essentially what Urban Meyer thought he was going to do when he went from Ohio State to the broadcast booth to Jacksonville. Is the very thing that coaches at every level warn the new guys about as they come up. This level is not what you're used to. You have to be better. You have to be smarter. You have to be faster. You have to do all these things. But what Urban Meyer said is, it's not that I'm wrong. It's that the entire NFL is wrong. And the way you guys have been doing things forever is wrong. And that I will show you, I will make this team into a college team and I will win. And he didn't win. And that starts with the hiring of the strength coach, who, as we discussed back when it happened, like the culture of an NFL team is not the same as the culture of a college team. And you cannot hire some domineering strength coach and think that grown men who all have their own strength coaches are going to listen to this guy, especially if he's going to pepper them with racial slurs. Like, it's not going to work. And that was the first grand opening and grand closing. And that's the clue we all should have taken. Go ahead, Dave.
Or Tim Tebow at tight end, which a lot of people saw as a little bit of a sideshow. But for the player, it matters more than that. Players, much more than we know, pay attention to who has roster spots, who gets into camp, who gets an opportunity. And when your message to the team is, hey, Tim Tebow deserves a roster spot at a position he's never played before, it's a signal of unseriousness in the first degree. And also, one last thing. I know we've gone on about this for a minute, but to me, Urban Meyer, it's similar to the Steve Spurrier era in Washington. It's similar to all these rules, all these situations. And the reason why people blame college coaches as a whole is because you have these high profile examples of people who really do think that they're General Patton. They're coming from a school where they are the highest paid, most powerful person on campus. I'll never forget the joke when the president of Ohio State was asked why he didn't fire Jim Tressel. And he said, I only hope Tressel doesn't fire me.
I remember
that mentality does not exist at the NFL level. Not even for Bill Belichick, I would argue. It's like you don't have that level of utter and absolute power. And Bill Belichick has actually rescinded some of his power from the draft perspective this past year, which is why they've had better drafts in New England. But it's just to say this idea where you are this all-powerful, for lack of a better term, and I use this term very, very directly, overseer, is very different. Like, instead of overseeing 18, 19, 20-year-olds who you get to bully, you're now in a room full of grown adults who are not going to take you kicking them as a form of motivation.
Megan McPeak, what do you think is next for Urban Meyer?
College football.
Yeah.
But like I said, where?
Dave, what do you think is next?
College football. And it will be a landing so cushy, you'll think he was falling from a trapeze at the Big Apple Circus.
Yeah, and now, like I said at the top of the program, I think he'll get another college job. And if he doesn't do that, I could also see him reinventing himself, either as a studio analyst, which is what he was doing before, or even as like an all-purpose talking head on Fox News or Newsmax or One American News Network. But let's move on to my favorite part of the week, in or out. Dave Zirin, before the Grey Cup, which I call the World Championship of 3-down football, CFL was out here saying that they are looking at ways to speed up the game, or not speed up the game, but improve the game, get more offense into the game. And they are reviewing everything. Everything's on the table, up to and including going from 3 downs to 4 downs. Dave Zirin, you in or out on 4-down CFL football?
Well, as someone who undoubtedly will someday be seeking asylum in Canada, I'm for as much distinction between Canadian and American football as possible, so Canada can stay Canada. 3 downs is as Canada as going to Tim Hortons. So let's keep it up and keep what makes Canada distinct from the United States, because I'm not sure if copying this land in which I call home is the best blueprint on any particular subject at the moment.
Listen, we will gladly welcome you into our growing American expatriate community. Like, my mom made that decision 50 years ago for many of the same reasons. My parents saw all this coming. Megan McPeak, you in or out on 3-down CFL football?
I am in on 3-down football, to Dave's point. Keep the distinction. Because at that, like, after you change, like, what's the point? You're then fighting against the NFL, as you already are, but you're basically trying to match exactly what they're doing. Not going to happen. Keep it the way you are. And can we start a movement to get me to the next Grey Cup in Hamilton in a couple of years? I really tried to join the Arkells. I really tried, but I guess I just wasn't a good enough, secret halftime act.
Can you sing the anthem, or at least play it on a recording?
Absolutely not. Nobody wants that. I'm not going to do that to everybody.
Listen, Darnell Clash did not don a floor-length fur coat and strut into Toronto for you guys to go from 3 downs to 4. Henry Gizmo Williams did not run back Lance Chomik's missed field goal 199 yards in the 1987 Grey Cup for you guys to go from 3 downs to 4. Brian Walling, Edmonton Eskimos running back, also a substitute teacher, also a Taekwondo instructor, did not go 50 yards in the playoffs to beat the hated Calgary Stampeders for you guys to go from 3 downs to 4. CFL goes from 3 downs to 4. As I told you guys, I will find a melon-colored blazer and set it on fire, burn it in effigy in protest. And I'm not watching any more CFL if they go 4 downs, because if 3 downs disappears, the wide field disappears, the goalpost at the front of the end zone disappears, the long missed field goal returns disappear, the single point for a touchback disappears, all that stuff disappears. And what they're coming for next is your clear milk bags that you cut the corner on before you pour the 2% milk. And then you might as well not even have Canada. So it stops right here. We're sticking with 3 downs. All right, last one. The International Olympic Committee says it's going to drop. Get rid of weightlifting, get rid of boxing for the 2028 games in Los Angeles. Megan McPeak, you in or out on an Olympic Games, Summer Olympics with no boxing and no weightlifting?
Absolutely not in on this. Like, what are they thinking? Then again, we're talking about the IOC. So are they ever thinking, don't do this. Don't do this. Okay. Don't do this. The boxing and the weightlifting is some of the most compelling at the Olympics. Like, you have the athletics, you have soccer, you have basketball, and then you have weightlifting and boxing. For me, at least, that's like those are the 5 things I like watching. There's always something compelling about them. Don't get rid of it. Like, do something smart for once, International Olympic Committee, for once.
You're asking a lot, Megan.
I know, I really am.
Dave Zirin, you in or out?
Look, all respect to the people who do esports and frisbee golf and all the things that they're trying to bring into the Olympic Games, but this is about them looking forward and not looking to what actually makes the Olympics compelling, which is things that human beings have done for thousands of years. And so the issue of combat and the issue of I can lift this much, how much can you lift? I mean, that dates pretty far back in the human DNA. And that's what I find most compelling about the Olympics, these certain human acts of sport that we have done for thousands of years, finding new relevance in our modern times. And so I would hope that they would turn away from the direction they're clearly going, which is like, how do we get Gen Z to watch the Olympics, and instead trust the incredibly intrinsic competition and excitement that exists in these sports.
Listen, I understand from the IOC standpoint, because they want to stamp out corruption, right?
Oh, yeah. We're really going to take that seriously.
So, because when you think about Olympic boxing, right, you can think way back, Patterson, Ali, Fraser, Foreman into the 70s, Sugar Ray Leonard, and all those great Americans that won those medals in Montreal in 1976. But after that, like, what do you think of when you think of Olympic boxing? You think of Evander Holyfield getting robbed in 1984 when he hit the guy from New Zealand. Yeah. And you think of Roy Jones getting robbed against Park Si-hun in 1988. Like, that was a pivotal moment in boxing history, which is to say that boxing is particularly like vulnerable to corruption, but I just don't know how that makes that any different from all these other Olympic sports and any different from the Olympic bid process. Like, if anything, that should make them a charter member of the club. And if you're going to get rid of weightlifting, then you got to get rid of the you got to need a new Olympic motto, because you can't have higher, faster, stronger with no stronger. So keep boxing, keep weightlifting, keep the party going. So listen, guys and women, thanks for sticking with us this far in terms of this episode, but also in terms of the ride we've been on for the last 13 months here at Bring It In. We do this every week. Like, in the new year, we'll be back into our weekly schedule. So Dave Zirin, between now and the new year, the people are going to get to miss you. Tell the people where to find you.
Well, I mean, the best way is stick your head out the window and just go, Dave! Or go on Twitter.
There you go, at Edge of Sports. Megan McPeak, the year of Megan McPeak. Tell the people between now and then where they can find you.
As always, on Twitter, at Megan McPeak, spelled with an H, because it is the right way to do it. However, it is the holiday season, so I'm gonna chill for a little bit on the social media, just because we all need a break from that stuff.
Oh, geez, seriously, it's depressing. And as for me, you can find me on Twitter at Morgan P. Campbell. You can find me on Instagram at Morgan P. Campbell. Instagram has finally figured out that I'm a washed middle-aged suburban dad. So like, every time I fire up Instagram, like all these sponsored posts, like everything is, hey, how do you fix low T? You thinking of fixing your low T? Hey, have you ever tried Nugenics? Have you ever tried Total T? Like, every other ad. So I guess I got to go work on my testosterone, according to Instagram. But anyway, at Morgan P. Campbell on both those platforms. Feel free to join the conversation about this show. Use the hashtag Bring It In. We might get back to you unless you're a jerk. I have a personal policy: don't feed the trolls. But there it goes. Now, I don't engage people making arguments that I didn't make. So you come in my mentions and complain, there's a good chance I'll ignore you. But if you come in good faith, want to make conversation, we can do that. In the meantime, hit like on this video, hit subscribe on CBC Sports YouTube, leave a comment, because it's the holiday season and somebody's hungry. Who is that, Megan?
The algorithm.
Let's feed the algorithm. Perfect. So until the new year, when we get back into our schedule, we want to wish you guys the happiest of holidays. Even Sonny Liston, the king of the stare down, wishes you a happy holiday. And especially if you're in Ontario and you're going to wind up like in your house for the next few months while this Omicron wave surges and hopefully crests, like, listen, we're here to help you, keep you informed, keep you entertained, pass the time until like life can return to normalish. But until then, this has been, what has it been? Bring It In. Yes, sorry, it's been a while. I'm rusty. This has been Bring It In with Morgan Campbell. I'm your host, Morgan Campbell. We will see you in the new year.